Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I would like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Do so many shows. What, who am I on again?
I was trying to give a dramatic pause. Actually, I was thinking of some stupid little nickname to give you, but I couldn't think of anything.
It's all right. Dude, always happy to be here, always excited to be on. Want to thank our listeners for tuning in week in and week out. Let's talk some boxing.
All right, we're going to start off. We'll go ahead and tonight's plan is to review the four bigger fights that happened this weekend or this past weekend, which two of them were really good. Two of them were not so good. Then we are going to talk a little bit about the most underrated fighters in boxing history, which Jeremiah will bring up some guy that fought in like 1642 on a plantation. But we'll start off Anthony Dirrell against Norbert Nemespada. What was your take on Dirrell beating this guy senseless?
Oh, well, I mean, what did we expect? We expected a beatdown. I mean, we got what we thought was going to happen. I mean, I didn't find it particularly exciting. Again, we all knew the results going in. I mean, most of us weren't familiar with his opponent. So he went in and took care of business and, his plan, and hopefully, the victory will be in title contention.
So where do you see him going from here? And what titles do you think he would go after, since there's 42 of them in every division?
Yep, lots of options. It's hard to say exactly who he would target. I think part of it depends on what Badou Jack and James DeGale plan on doing. Of course, I think it would be pretty tough for him to get Ramirez. So I think who he would probably target is the WBA title holder. Of course, Callum Smith, the quality British prospect, is also targeting him. So it's just kind of tough. I don't know who he goes after in particular. I just know that Ramirez is it's tough to get together because, Ramirez is a Bob Arum fighter. So, if DeGale sticks around at 168, which he seems like he could, that seems like a fight. They could, certainly make that happen, of course. And that would be a quality fight. But, again, I just think it depends on what DeGale and Jack decide to do. If Jack moves up to 175 like he says he wants to, then a rematch is, then there's not going to be a rematch. So that opens the door for him. But it's just hard to say at this point.
All right, and that brings us to not the fight of the week, Arizona de Lara. KO 4 over Yuri. He sure to hell ain't related to George Foreman. Pretty much what we expected. Yuri Foreman didn't belong there.
Yeah, again, it was like the Dirrell fights. I don't
think it was, because I think that this Norbert, whatever the hell his last name is, I think at least tried. He just wasn't quite as good. Yuri Foreman hasn't been in a big quality fight in 4 years, 5 years almost.
Yeah, since the Miguel Cotto fight. I watched a bit of the early rounds, and Foreman was trying to box with Lara. But he just doesn't have the goods to do so. Lara, to his credit, he got him out of there quickly. Honestly, I didn't think it would be that quick. While we were all hoping for a stoppage, of course, Lara, it was in his best interest to do so, to try to get him out of there. And he did. The last shot was pretty good. It seemed a little over dramatic. Didn't know Foreman was hurt quite that bad. But Lara's, he's a title holder. He's got plenty of options. I heard he wants to unify with Charlo. That would be pretty cool to see. They used to have the same trainer.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting fight, especially since Charlo looks better over his last few. It looks like he's progressing at least.
Yeah, and I know these guys sparred a lot when they were down in Texas. So, there's some style familiarity there. But it's just a good fight for boxing. So I would love to see it happen, but, who knows?
And next up, we had Gervonta Davis against Jose Pedraza, which was a 7-round stoppage, good fight. Davis was impressive. I mean, he hadn't really fought any quality competition, nowhere near Pedraza. I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of people have the same opinion. I mean, Davis looked, a lot of people were hyping this kid up pretty good before, he won in the fight. And, a lot of us thought that maybe it'd be a step too far because, like you said, he didn't fight anybody top-notch, but he made the jump and looked high quality. I mean, he had quick hands, good power. He seemed to have a good sense of distance. He put a nice little beating on Pedraza. I don't think Pedraza had the best game plan going in. I thought he would utilize his height a little bit more, but Davis just kind of rolled over him. And, now that he's a title holder, again, just like Lara, his options are plentiful.
Yeah, and to me, I think maybe Pedraza took him a little lightly. Maybe Pedraza looked at the record of competition he'd fought also. Maybe,
especially because Pedraza is a guy who's already had a couple of good fights, and not only that, he had a long amateur background. So, maybe he's like, I've seen this type of stuff time and time again, but whatever happened, I know he's been making excuses that he was dehydrated and whatnot. The point is he got beat convincingly. But I'm excited to see how this kid progresses. I mean, he only has, 17 fights, 16 fights, and, he looks pretty good, especially in a good division like 130.
Yeah, so where would you like to see him go from here?
I would like to see him, I think guys like Lomachenko are a step too far. But there are a lot of other good fighters that I would like to see him fight. I think, one of the other belt holders, just Real Corrales, I think that would be a good fight, even though Lomachenko might get it. I think that would be a nice, interesting scrap. I mean, Corrales has good hand speed, looks like he has solid pop, has a little more experience than Davis does. I think even a fight against one of the tougher guys like Mira, even Jason Sosa, Salido would be pretty good. Though I don't think Salido would travel down that road right now. I don't think Davis brings in the kind of money that many of his other options have. But it's just looking at the rankings, I think he's likely to get somebody maybe like Corrales, maybe like Jason Sosa. I don't see him getting the big names right away, and I don't see his first defense as being against a big name.
And it probably shouldn't be, because Pedraza was his first big win, and they knew they still need to develop the guy a little bit before he steps up and goes against a Lomachenko or a Salido.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he looks like he's got good natural ability, but you throw him against one of the more experienced tough guys in Vargas, Salido, he might get run over. And I'm not saying anything against his skill. It's just those guys have sort of developed a way to handle these sort of things.
Yeah, and Davis is a guy. If you develop his skill for a couple of years, maybe those guys don't run over him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he beats him. Maybe he moves up to 135 and becomes a belt holder there. I mean, the kid looks good. I guess we'll just wait with bated breath.
All right, that brings us to the main fight of the week, which we had two super middleweight titleists, which, as we both agree, is stupid. But both of these guys are really good fighters. They put on a really good show. You had James DeGale and Badou Jack fought to a draw. Who'd you have winning the fight?
I had it a draw, actually.
That's a cop-out.
No, typically I don't score a draw, but, I mean, DeGale scored the knockdown early. Jack scored the knockdown late. I thought DeGale won most of the early rounds. I thought Jack won most of the late rounds. And I did score to draw. But most people seem to favor Badou Jack. I mean, he was the aggressor. He seemed to land, especially in the later rounds, DeGale seemed to tire a bit. Jack just seemed strong, and the momentum seemed to be in his favor. But titles aside, all these silly trinkets like the WBO, WBA, WBC, all that crap, this was for the Ring Magazine's undisputed championship. This was supposed to be, to crown the man. And that's all I really care about. Unfortunately, we didn't get a decisive winner. We're still left in limbo. But it was an excellent
looks like
fight.
The chances for a rematch are small also.
Yeah, from the post-fight conference, it seems that way, though. It's always hard to tell in boxing. But the thing is, we got a really good fight. I mean,
yeah, it was just supporting how many zeros they put in front of a contract, too, whether he's going to say no or not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, But it was a really good fight. I thought it was excellent. I mean, I'd love to see him do it again. But the post-fight conference was just fucking weird. It was.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to make of it. I mean, they shoved the mic in Mayweather's face. He embarrassed us all. Just kind of he just embarrassed himself. I mean, they didn't even talk to Eddie Hearn, possibly the best promoter in the sport. All he kept talking about how it was, controversial. Well, he didn't even say it was controversial. Basically, they robbed his fighter. They plan on Badou Jack to move up to 175, and they seem almost like they had their heart set on it. It was just weird. Childish.
Yeah, and it's a fight that could have went either way. I had Jack winning by a point, but it was a toss-up fight that nobody can sit there. I mean, it's a controversial decision, but it's not a bad decision.
No, by no means is it a bad decision. My only problem is I want to see the rematch. I mean, maybe Badou Jack has outgrown 168. Maybe he has. I mean, if that is the case, there's nothing you can really do. I mean, if your body just can't do it anymore, then your body can't do it anymore. I don't like his prospects at 165, but it is what it is. I guess we'll wait.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Badou Jack, we're going to talk a little bit about underrated fighters. I think he's one of those guys. And he's a guy that we always think, well, he's going to lose this next fight. But he seems to get better each time out. What do you think his prospects are at 175? Now, I don't see him going up and fighting a Kovalev or even a Stevenson, and God help him if he fights Andre Ward. I think I think two of those guys are completely out of his league. Stevenson, he may have a shot against.
Stevenson, I agree. If he's going to win a title from anybody, it would likely be Stevenson.
Yeah, because he can outbox Stevenson. You just got to make sure you don't get hit with that one shot.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, however, is Jack really isn't. He's not great defensively. I mean, he's good at blocking. He'll put the earmuffs on and he'll block what comes at you. But at 175, a division that's loaded with a lot of punchers, I'm not sure he gets away with that against bigger guys. I mean, Ward, we agree, he outboxes him. Kovalev, Stevenson, Joe Smith Jr., Gwozdzik, Alvarez is a pretty good puncher. Beterbiev is a big puncher. Even Sullivan Barrera can box and crack a little bit. There's just a lot of good punchers up there. And Badou Jack, as good as he's looked, his chin is still not great. You know what I mean? He was dropped to Gale, who's a good puncher but not a great puncher. He was stopped in one round by Derek Edwards. So I just don't like his prospects because there's so many big punchers up there. I don't see him having the same sort of success that he did at 168.
All right, so that moves us. We got anything coming up this weekend? I didn't find much really that interested me.
No, I didn't see much either. I mean, it just seems to be a slow weekend.
And it looks like Jeff Horn will fight Manny Pacquiao. Is that what you're hearing also?
It seems to be all but official. I mean, I'm hearing that, of course, this isn't confirmed either, but it seems like it's part of this bigger plan to have Manny Pacquiao, go on some type of world tour. He's going to start with Jeff Horn, maybe move on to a guy like Ricky Burns, and then from there, I'm not exactly sure. I've even heard that he might fight in Russia. That is interesting. I'm not exactly sure who he would take on, but again, it's interesting. I mean, if he's finishing his career doing this sort of thing, I can deal with it, honestly.
Well, I can't, but to me, it's a money grab. He owes Bob Arum money, and he's paying it off right now.
Yeah,
just my opinion. We need to get Jeff Horn on the show again. You need to get on the horn to Jeff Horn's dad.
I will do.
And remind him that we interviewed his son when nobody else did.
Yeah, right. Before he got the Pacquiao fight.
Yeah, before he was a star. Right. All right, we talked before. We're going to talk about who our most underrated boxers in the history of boxing are. You want to start it off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna start with a divisional thing right now, and I'm gonna go with James J. Jeffries. We've talked about him before, and when I see people make up their top 10, top 15, top 20 all-time lists, his name is missing more often than anybody else's. And I find that a bit unfortunate, not only because he was a great fighter, and he fought a number of great fighters, but it's also because had he not come back and faced Jack Johnson in a fight he didn't really need to take, he would have finished his career at 19-0, and that would have put him in, this rare air with guys like Rocky Marciano. And I think that's part of the reason he gets ignored, because he had that one loss, and people attach his loss to Jack Johnson to his resume more than anything else. But this is a guy who fought a lot of really good fighters, and even early on in his career. I mean, he fought Joe Chonsky, who was an excellent fighter, an old Peter Jackson, Tom Sharkey, Bob Fitzsimmons, James J. Corbett. Corbett was a little past it at the moment, but he beat these guys, more than once. He spent a lot of his career fighting Hall of Fame caliber guys, had a good number of defenses in comparison to his total fights. He was a big guy, strong guy. Apparently he ran a quick, I'm trying to remember what it was, but a lot of people make a big deal about his 40-yard dash, maybe it was a 100-yard dash, but he ran a pretty quick time. He was an athletic guy. But he would be a guy that I certainly nominate as one of the most underrated fighters in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that's really bad is the fact that he's being judged off something that happened. I mean, if you look at his record, he beat Jack Monroe in 1904. His next fight was Jack Johnson, which was, 5 years later?
Right.
Almost 6 years later. I mean,
right.
So he was forced to do that. And then as we were talking the other day, I mean, I know that you saw the story where he actually didn't even want to fight when the fight happened.
Yeah, I mean, I read James J. Corbett's biography, and a lot of people don't know, but Corbett actually worked Jeffrey's corner for that fight. And, he was trying to whip him into shape. Unfortunately, Jeffries didn't want to go through with this. I mean, it was too much societal pressure on him. I mean, you had the hopes of, most of a nation riding on your back in your years out of retirement. You're hanging out on a farm, and all of a sudden people are throwing you in a boxing ring. I mean, you can only imagine how tough that would be. But not only that, you're fighting a prime, well-oiled machine. And apparently, Corbett said that, Jeffries didn't really want to talk to the media, and they were wondering why. Well, Jeffries allegedly had a mental breakdown 3 days before the fight because of all the pressure that was put on him. And Corbett, when the fight came, I mean, obviously, Johnson toyed with him. It was no matchup. Corbett actually resorted to yelling, racial slurs and all sorts of expletives in the ring to try to throw Johnson off his game. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to work. I mean, Jeffries, no matter what he did, he just wasn't going to beat Johnson that day.
All right. I'm going to go with mine. I'm going to go Luis Manuel Rodriguez. And I'm going to go with him. I mean, he had a great record, but the big thing that stood out to me is he was 1-2 against Emil Griffith. The one he won was unanimous. The other two were split decisions. Griffith, I think, was an elite welter and middleweight, one of the greatest of the last 50 or 60 years. Angelo Dundee said that Rodriguez, in his opinion, was one of the most underrated boxers ever. Now, I do know that Angelo Dundee is known to overhype people, and that's probably putting it mildly. But I'm going to go with Luis Rodriguez. What's your take on Rodriguez?
See, Rodriguez is one of those guys who's flown out under the radar, time and time again because he fought in an era where, Griffith was more recognizable. But, I mean, you look at his record, and it was excellent. I mean, he had 107 wins, 13 losses, 49 knockouts. I mean, and on top of that, you look at how stacked his resume was. I mean, not only did he fight Griffith.
Benvenuti.
Right. He fought, Curtis Cokes, who was a damn good fighter. He fought Dennis Moyer, who was a solid fighter. Holly Mims, who was the contender for a while. Reuben Hurricane Carter, who a lot of people recognize from the movie, a good puncher, beat him a number of times. This was Benny Briscoe.
He beat Benny the Kid Perrette twice also.
Yeah. I mean, he stopped George Benton, though it was a cut. I mean, Benton was a master-class defensive man, and he was able to outbox him and get a TKO in the ninth. Of course, again, like I said, it was a cut that finally ended the deal. But this is a guy who, consistently fought top opposition, and though he wasn't always on the winning side, this was a guy who was very hard to beat time and time again.
In 2009, the Ring magazine ranked him the third greatest Cuban fighter ever, behind Kid Gavilan and Kid Chocolate. That's not too bad a company either.
No, if you're placing above Jose Napoles, you're in good standing.
Yeah, I mean, the guy had a great record. Who you got next?
I'm a little stuffed up here. Well, again, I'm gonna just do it quickly in terms of something divisional, but I think the light heavyweight division has a lot of underrated fighters. I think John Henry Lewis, that would be one guy at the light heavyweight division that I think people widely ignore, and I think part of it's because also with him he kind of has his name attached to Joe Louis, who ended up stopping him in one round, and the fight was, I don't know if I want to call it a farce, but Joe Louis really gave him a payday. He was like, "Hey."
Well, wasn't he sick and he needed money or something, or
yeah, I think it was.
Yeah,
I think either it was that or his eyesight was failing. That would have. Yeah, I think he was blind in one eye, and his eyesight was getting worse and worse. So, Louis wanted to help a friend out, and honestly, I wish I had a friend like that. Yeah, but I mean, this is a guy who,
Thanks. I thought I was a friend like that, but all right.
So you knock me out for some money? Well, hey,
yes, I would. I would knock your ass out for free. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that's not the kind of friend that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think, didn't Lewis win close to 100 fights too? Yeah.
I mean, Lewis, he had 100 wins, 11 losses, 5 draws. I mean, the only time that he was stopped was in his last fight against Joe Louis. I mean, and if you're damn near blind and your friend's just trying to give you a payday, take the knockout. Fuck it. I mean, you don't need those sort of bragging rights. I mean, at that point he needed money. But he fought all sorts of good people. I mean, he lost to Jim Braddock. He was knocked down in the 5th round.
Maxie Rosenblum.
Yeah, he struggled with Maxie. He struggled with Flapsy, but Rosenblum was a tough outing for anybody. I mean, Rosenblum, he didn't really turn his punches over well, hence the nickname. But he was a boxing motherfucker. I mean, he gave all sorts of great fighters a good night's go. But guys like Tiger Jet Fox, who were top contenders, Jack McAvoy, who was a very good British fighter, and he had a number of defenses, fought a lot of good people, and made a part-time successful foray into the heavyweight division as well. But of course, with the failing eyesight and whatnot, he never, could never really do it full time. But he's an excellent light heavyweight, and I think he deserves a little more recognition.
All right. I'm going to go with a former world welterweight contender, Holman Williams. I think he turned pro in the early 30s. But his career, he fought guys like Coco Kidd, Charlie Burrell, Eddie Booker, Bob Satterfield, Archie Moore, Marcel Cerdan, Jake LaMotta. And I know he gave Charlie Burrell all he could handle, and, that's the guy everybody brings up as being the most underrated. What's your take on Holman Williams? And I think his record was something like 140-30 also.
So Holman Williams is a guy that I will always agree with you with as being underrated because, I mean, not only did he fight a ton of really good fighters, I mean, lots of guys who ended up being in the Hall of Fame, but he fought some guys tough in his later days, too. I mean, he gave, Marcel Cerdan a good little go in later on in his career when he was fading. But when you talk about Charlie Burley, he actually tied Charlie Burley in the series. I have a tendency to favor Burley just slightly because he scored the only knockdown in the series. But in terms of wins and losses, Holman Williams was actually 500 with him, and that's pretty damn impressive. And I think that extends not only to the middleweight division, but the welterweight division. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy who could, trade wins and losses with one of the greatest fighters of all time. And I've actually done a little studying of Holman Williams as well, looked at some of the, old newspaper clippings. And from everything that I gathered, he was a hell of a boxer. Actually, he was a decent puncher when he first started his career, but he broke his hand and it never quite recovered. And, of course, a lot of older guys kind of did that because, if you snapped your hand and your only way of making a buck is by fighting, well, you were in the ring the next month.
Well, the James Braddock. I mean, that's why Braddock took a few years off during the Depression because he broke his hand and had problems with his hands.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and guys like Harry Greb, for instance, Greb, he was never a great puncher, but when he sat down on his punches, he had a little zip behind him. But he was even quoted as saying, like, hey, why am I going to try to, especially when the gloves are smaller too. And he's like, why am I going to, risk breaking my hand on some guy that I can easily beat? Leave that until, he gets into his big fights. But Holman Williams is definitely a fighter that deserves a lot more recognition. I mean, it's just unfortunate because he was a top contender in the middleweight division for many years. But, I think some historians have made a bit too much about, the white fighters avoiding the black fighters. Certainly there was some, like Fritzy Zivik when he fought Charlie Burley. It's like, fuck that manager, buy that guy's contract, I don't want to fight him again. But he did fight him. But a lot of this could be attributed to the war as well, because guys like Holman Williams and Charlie Burley and a number of the other black murderers, so they came up during World War II, and unfortunately a lot of the white fighters went off to war, and they weren't available to defend.
Yeah. All right. Who you got? Anybody else?
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, I could probably do this all day because...
We got to do our football show here in about a half hour to an hour, so we got about 20 more minutes.
so unfortunately, I don't have all day, people. But, I mean, I'd just say that I could do this all day because there's so many people that are widely ignored. I mean, we often talk about the best of the best, guys like Grab and Robinson and Ketchel and on and on and on. I actually think Bob Fitzsimmons, Ruby, is a bit underrated. And he gets pretty high praise from his contemporaries. Joe Gans, the long-term lightweight champion. When he was a youngster, he would just sit ringside and watch Fitzsimmons operate. He was a master.
Fitzsimmons was the first guy to actually legitimately hold three titles.
Yes, he was. And he doesn't get enough credit for him, in my opinion. I mean, I see a lot of these newer fans, and they're like, oh, Roy Jones Jr., he held the middleweight title, the light heavyweight title, and the heavyweight title. Well,
no,
he didn't hold any of those titles. I mean, he wasn't the undisputed in any of those divisions. So
no, and there's no way he would even risk fighting Klitschko.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's just. I mean, and he did fight Darius Michalczewski, who was the lineal champion at the time. I mean, people are quick to forget this stuff. I mean, Roy Jones looked better, no doubt about that. But a guy like Bob Fitzsimmons won the undisputed middleweight championship, heavyweight championship, and then at the late age won the light heavyweight championship. And he didn't beat no hopers either. I mean, he stopped Corbett to win the light heavyweight championship. He beat George Gardner. Then he did beat Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, who's a Hall of Famer. He was just an excellent fighter, and he was punching way above his weight. I mean, he was starching guys 250-plus pounds.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you one. I'm going to go with Jimmy Bivens. I think he was one of the top light heavyweight and heavyweight contenders in the late 40s, early 50s. Basically, that's when boxing was undergoing a huge resurgence in popularity. He never managed to win a belt, but Bivens did record victories over a huge list of former and future world champions such as Archie Moore, Ezzard Charles, Joey Maxim. He went to distance with Joe Louis. He lost a split decision to Jersey Joe Walcott. So I'm going with Jimmy Bivens on it. I just think if you look at the guys he fought, the ones he beat, I mean, he fought a very high caliber of fighters. And like I said, he beat Moore, Charles, and Maxim. To me, that makes you a great fighter.
Hell yeah. I mean, you've got to have something to beat guys like that. And not only that, he did beat, like a lot of the black fighters at the time, they did have to fight their contemporaries, but he did beat Charlie Burley in his 15th fight. That's pretty damn impressive. Of course, Burley, he just didn't open up early on. Whatever it is, Bivens got the win. He beat Teddy Yaros, who was a damn good fighter himself. It looks like he beat Joey Maxim, who is a damn good fighter. Beat all sorts of damn good fighters. I mean, it's hard to fathom why some of these guys get so little recognition when they put in so much work and beat so many great fighters. But Bivens is a great call.
Okay. Since I made a great call, you want to make the next call?
Yeah, I'm always willing to. So I would probably, and I've talked about this before, but one of the most underrated fighters, I think. Well, I'm going to skip him this time. I talked about him the first time that we talked about underrated fighters, but I'm actually going to go with Jimmy McLaurin. And I think he gets overshadowed because he fought with two great contemporaries, Barney Ross and Tony Canzoneri. But he is highly undervalued, in my opinion. I mean, he had, way less fights in Canzoneri, less fights in Barney Ross, not too many less, but less. But I think part of the reason why he gets ignored is because he only had 2 title wins. So he won the title, lost the title to Barney Ross, won the title, lost the title to Barney Ross. But when you look at his resume, it's outstanding. I mean, he started out as a flyweight, spent most of his 21st fights there, ended up fighting Fidel LaBarba, who ended up being the best flyweight in the world, in only 11 fights, mind you. He beat Pancho Villa, beat Bud Taylor, Jackie Fields, Sammy Mandel, Louis Kid Kaplan. I mean, these guys are bona fide Hall of Famers. Again, he beat Ross, ended up beating Canzoneri after a loss, Billy Patrol, young Corbett III. When you take into account everything that he did, this guy's team of Hall of Famers. And that's pretty incredible when you put that into perspective, because the only person who has more is Harry Greb.
All right, I'll go with that one. You talk about him on almost every show, I think. But
do I?
No.
Well,
you brought it up a few times, and Dave, the guy that was the co-host before you, used to bring him up all the time too. So I'll go with it. But yeah, he was a great fighter. I'm going to go a little bit more contemporary since you stay in the Stone Age. I'm going to go Esteban de Jesus. And my simple reason is he beat Roberto Duran in like 1973.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at his career. Knocked out Peppermint Frazier, who was a former junior welterweight champion. He beat Suzuki to win the WBC's world lightweight title. He had a second fight with Duran where he actually knocked Duran down, but Duran came back to pretty much dominate the fight and win it. Got a third chance against Duran, took Duran 12-13 tough rounds again. And basically, I think his career was ended because of drug use, which he admitted to doing his entire career. But I think his last title fight was on the Holmes-Ledoux undercard in 1980 in Bloomington, Minnesota, when he was knocked out in the 13th round by Saul Mambi, who was underrated but fairly boring to watch. But I'm going to throw Esteban de Jesus out there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would agree with you. I mean, a lot of people would like to see him inducted in the Hall of Fame, and largely because he was able to beat. He was the only guy to beat a prime Duran.
Yeah, when nobody else even really came close.
Right. I mean, it's hard to argue against something like that. I just think he was a little too spotty in title fights to warrant induction into the international.
Yeah, I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I just think he was a really good fighter that doesn't get the due he deserved. And the question is this: without the drug use, how good could he have been?
Yeah, just one of the many question marks surrounding, many fighters. I mean, how many talented guys have we seen come and go?
Many athletes. Doesn't matter what sport it is, there's a bunch of guys like that.
Exactly. I mean, it's you can't argue it. I mean, we've just seen so many. I'm sure that there have been people superior to, probably Sugar Ray Leonard, but they just fell by the wayside because of, something stupid.
heck? You turn the radio on? Let's see. So what you got next?
All right. So I'm going to go with one more fighter, and then we can talk a little bit about some boxing news if you'd like.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Pat. I'm going to go with another Irishman in Packy McFarland. I mean, the guy was in official contests. He was undefeated, 70-0, 5 draws, 50 knockouts. I mean, you read the newspaper reports on this guy, and he was just amazing. I mean, he might have been the best fighter of his time. Unfortunately, with the weight classes at the time, he didn't have the luxury like today's modern fighters of hanging out at, 100, like he was. His best weight was probably 140 pounds in his prime. Of course, back then, between lightweight, which was 133 at the time, and welterweight, it was when you're in that middle ground there, you either got to, try to drain yourself to get to that 7 pounds below your best weight, or you're going to try to move up and fight the bigger guys. Well, I mean, he never became champion, but you look at his record, and he beat some outstanding fighters. I mean, he beat Freddie Welsh. Jimmy Britt was a damn good fighter. He beat all sorts of fighters. Oh, he beat my guy Jack Britton, 2 out of 3 contests. The first one happened to be a draw, but apparently, it was a damn good fight. He beat Owen Moran, who was an excellent fighter himself. Contenders like Harlem Tommy Murphy. He was just, in his prime, he was unstoppable. And this is a guy who I think would get some justice in having a book written about him. Unfortunately, he just wasn't a character, right? He wasn't into drinking and smoking, and he wasn't even that much of a fan of the sport. But I think he's a guy who deserves it.
All right. I'll finish up with Tiger Flowers, the first black middleweight champion of the world. Beat Harry Greb twice, even though both were disputed. Also, let's see, who else was it that he fought? He fought somebody else that everything I read said he probably won the fight, but he didn't get the win.
Yeah, you're talking about his title bout with Mickey Walker.
Yeah, why couldn't I remember that name? Toy Bulldog. But, yeah, I mean, you look, he fought Jack Delaney, Johnny Wilson, Panama Joe Gans, Kid Norfolk, Pete Lotso, Maxie Rosenblum, who he drew with a couple times, lost once or twice, too. But anybody that got 2 decisions over Harry Greb, I think, is probably an underrated fighter since you don't really hear him mentioned that much.
No, you don't. I mean, he started to get a little more recognition over time, and I think, largely on the strength of his wins. And then, I mean, when you beat, Harry Greb was aging at that time, and he only had good eyesight in one eye. But, I mean, still, you look at Harry Greb's
yeah, but he was
record,
still beating most guys with the good eyesight in one eye.
Exactly. And not only was he beating good guys, he was beating guys who, again, ended up being in the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, he was still a real damn good fighter. And, of course, you read the ringside reports. It was disputed, whatever. I mean, almost every fighter in their career gets that sort of treatment. I mean, you look at, Mayweather is a good example. Regardless of how clearly he beat most of his fighters, a lot of people think Castillo won the first fight. But that's just how it is. I mean, most of these people get close decisions in their favor. But it's hard to, you can't knock Tiger Flowers for what happened to him. I think the thing about Flowers is that people, they have a tough time rating him because even though from all accounts he was excellent, he had kind of an awkward style, and that's part of what gave Harry Greb so much trouble. He had an awkward style. He was quick. He threw a lot of punches. The only thing that kind of let him down, and one thing that prevents people from rating him in the top 10 a lot of times, is that his chin just wasn't that good. I mean, you look at his losses, and 10 of his 15 losses were by knockout. I mean, he was knocked out by Panama Joe Gans, who was a contender in his day. He was knocked out by him twice. Knocked out by Kid Norfolk, who was a top-rated light heavyweight in his time. He was starched in 2 rounds by an old Sam Langford. Jack Delaney seemed to have his number. So it's one of those things where, he seemed to have all the intangibles. It's just his chin let him down from time to time. But that's an excellent call, and I'm happy to see that over time he's starting to get a little more recognition.
All right. So what's the boxing news this week?
There's always some boxing news going on. I'm just happy to see that, the year's starting to slowly get into the rhythm of things. The hangover of day one is starting to wear off. But I was reading that, and I think Carl Froch is going to cry. I know he's listening to this, so don't cry, Carl.
Carl always tweets to me that he's listening to you. You kind of annoy him sometimes, he said. But go ahead.
Well, I guess it's mutual because, I get a little tired of hearing about him knocking out George Groves in front of 80,000 fans. But but that's why a tear's going to be brought to his eye, because apparently Eddie Hearn had requested thousands of more seats for Wembley, and Joshua Klitschko is going to break Groves Froch's attendance record. So they're expecting about 90,000 people to show up to this fight.
Yeah, and this is a fight that I really want to see. I think this is a heavyweight fight that might actually turn into a fight.
I'm sure as hell hoping so. I mean, when you sell that many tickets, Klitschko cannot – I like Klitschko. He's a good ambassador for the sport, but he's been accused too many times of being boring. And I think if he really wants to, leave a lasting imprint, because his legacy, in my opinion, is still kind of up for grabs. I mean –
yeah, he'll knock everybody out, but after boring you for 10 rounds.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he'll jab and grab you to death, and then in the 10th round he'll decide to blast you out. And to his credit,
in his defense, as they would say in England, he is a little chinny.
Yes, yep, and you can't blame him for being defensively cautious. I mean, that was what got him through almost 10 years of being on top. My thing in this fight is that he can't fight like he did against Tyson Fury. I mean, of course he can. He can do whatever he likes. But seeing as his legacy is still kind of up in the air, people aren't quite sure where to place him. I mean, I've seen all sorts of placements. I've seen anything from top 10 to top 30, depending on the context in which you view his work. And so, in my opinion, I think he's better off going at Joshua and trying to get him out of there. I think if he goes out and tries to blast him out, whether he ends up missing a bunch and fading late and getting stopped, I think he'll get
more respect that way than winning a boring decision, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Don't do the jab and grab crap in this fight. I mean, the whole world is watching. I mean, this is a fight. 90,000 people are paying to see you. Okay, make this everything you can. Go out on your shield, and again, do what you can to put a nice little rubber stamp on your legacy, and give us reason to cheer for you.
Well, and the question is, was he jabbing and grabbing even? I mean, against Fury, he looked even worse than usual. And my question is that because Fury was close to the same size as him, if not bigger? And if it is, what's Joshua going to do to him? Because same size, only Joshua's a lot quicker and a lot stronger, I think, than Fury.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Joshua doesn't have Fury's height, and I don't think Fury. I mean, I don't think Joshua has Fury's height, and Joshua certainly doesn't rely on his jab as much as Fury does. But I'm wondering how the hell Klitschko has beaten bigger guys than himself in the past. I mean, Marius Bach is real big. Kubrat Pulev was 6'4". A lot of people forget that.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between those guys who are limited and somebody like Joshua who's not, and really somebody like Fury is not limited. Fury is limited by himself.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
His own brain is his limitation, or
right.
lack therefore of.
Sure, and Joshua is shaping up to be the biggest, not in terms of overall size, but in terms of certainly muscle. I mean, Joshua looks. He's a hell of a package for his frame. So it's going to be hard, for Klitschko to grab that sort of fellow, and like he's done in the past, he's grabbed guys because he's bigger than them, and he relies on his size wearing them down, and that's one of the things that helps him score knockouts later on in the fights. The guy's so fatigued by being, getting hit with stiff jabs and then grabbed, and he just doesn't have much left. Joshua being younger, I don't think this is going to be much of an issue for him. I just wonder how Joshua's going to take the grabbing. Some guys are a little too complacent. They're like, okay, well, I'll engage, and then they turn the fight into a snooze fest. So the
last big heavyweight title fight was David Haye against Klitschko, and that was boring as hell.
Yeah, it was.
I was excited to see that fight, and 4 rounds in, I'm dozing off.
I was only excited because David Haye talked a bunch of crap, and then he ended up, circling around the ring the whole damn time.
Yeah, I was excited because I wanted to see David Haye get knocked out.
Yeah, unfortunately, he didn't give us that pleasure.
No, because he never got within 10 feet of Klitschko. I don't think we'll have that problem with Joshua, so my hope is this. Joshua, I think, is a little more skilled, a little bit quicker than Fury, maybe. Maybe that forces Klitschko to fight.
Maybe. Because Klitschko used to be more of a fighter. He used to throw a lot more hooks. He used to bang more on the inside. I'm hoping he resorts to his old style and, makes the fight exciting. We've seen Joshua hurt. It's not as if he can't be hurt. Klitschko, we know, packs a
Klitschko
serious
can punch.
Oh, there's no damn doubt about it. Have you seen that article about Klitschko? Some guy who apparently sparred a bunch of heavyweight champions and a bunch of good heavyweight fighters, and he said Klitschko was the hardest hitting of all of them.
Yeah, well, as big as he is, and hell, the dude's built like a baseball player in the late 90s.
Not only, a
little steroid era joke there, but.
Well, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Klitschko had been, on it for his entire reign.
Don't say it. Wouldn't surprise me if Joshua was on it.
Joshua, he's on it. I bet they're both on it.
Yeah, that's just because you're jealous because you can't get muscles like that from lifting.
Yeah, I've got a lot more work to do if I ever hope to be anywhere near that thing.
No, that's too much work. I don't need to look like that.
No. I like eating and sitting around on a computer too much to even attempt that.
Yeah. Well, you got anything else before we wrap this week up?
No, not a whole lot. Again, a lot of the fights are still kind of a work in progress, and nothing too big going on. But whenever something pops up, we'll talk about it next week.
All right, guys, so make sure you catch us next week again. Hopefully we will have a big guest, but we will definitely be previewing the Leo Santa Cruz-Carl Frampton rematch next week, which should be another great fight like the first one was. Make sure you check out The Grueling Truth at thegruelingtruth.net. You can follow us on Twitter at Grueling Truth. You can hear all our shows on iHeart, iTunes, Google Music, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn. Anywhere you hear podcasts, you'll hear The Grueling Truth. Later tonight, show will be out on Wednesday. We will have the NFL Pick'em show, which is the championship game previews. That'll be myself, Oz Davis, Brian Schmidt, Matt Andrew Scavage, and then we've got, of course, former Denver Bronco Mark Cooper, who was a starting guard in a drive in 1986, defending John Elway. But we got a special guest tonight also from the Patriots' first Super Bowl winning team, Mark Edwards, who was a starting fullback on that team, also played at Notre Dame, will be on the show also. So make sure you check that out. Joe Pritchard and former Green Bay quarterback Don Horn will have a preview show out for the Green Bay Packers against the Atlanta Falcons in the NFC Championship game. And, of course, former Steeler Dwight Stone will join Brian Schmidt for a preview of the AFC Championship on the Pittsburgh Steeler Weekly Show, so you can check all that out this week. But for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.